All right, welcome back to, after long last, man, a new Bible study in Luke. How was he outside?
He was fine outside.
Fine?
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Grumpy when we walked in.
I'd imagine that. I would imagine that. I hope some of y'all aren't grumpy with this study, because this is going to be quite a big chunk that we have today. But it all really goes together. I gotta, we're not just learning on the surface here. We're going in depth to see, trying to catch everything that Jesus is throwing out here. So we're going to be Luke 11, starting in verse 29, going all the way down to verse 54. And we will make a stop. Hang on. That works. And we'll make a stop over in Proverbs chapters 8 and 9. All right, I've only got the Luke verses on the screen here in OneNote, but once we get done here, we'll tear up Proverbs. It'll be really, really cool. So as usual, we'll recap where we were last time, which was forever ago, before Amari was amongst us. But back then, the last thing we had gone over was Jesus talking about the principle of the strong man spiritually, right? Like, we're not strong enough to fight off demonic forces on our own. We need the strong man of Jesus to protect, these kingdoms. And that true blessedness isn't in, just being associated with Christian stuff. It's in actually obeying the will of the Father. It's actually hearing the word of God and keeping it. That being a through theme in Luke. But let's go ahead and hop into this text. I'll read it and then we'll chop it up as is our usual. And keep in mind what happened in the last video, in the last Bible study, what's happening in this one, and what's going to be being covered for the next few Bible studies are all one really long discourse that Jesus is having between people from the crowd, his own disciples, and the Pharisees. So this is just one chunk of an overall conversation. Just keep that in mind. All right, so pick it up. When the crowds were increasing, he began to say, let me see, get this out here. Crowds were increasing. When the crowds are increasing, he began to say, this generation is an evil generation. It seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of Jonah. For as Jonah became a sign to the people of Nineveh, so will the Son of Man be to this generation. The queen of the south will rise up at the judgment with the men of this generation and condemn them. For she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and behold, something greater than Solomon is here. The men of Nineveh will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it. For they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and behold, something greater than Jonah is here. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it in a cellar or under a basket, but on a stand, so that those who enter may see the light. Your eye is the lamp of your body. When your eye is healthy, your whole body is full of light, but when it's bad, your body is full of darkness. Therefore, be careful, lest the light in you be darkness. If then your whole body is full of light, having no part dark, it will be wholly bright, as when a lamp with its rays gives you light. While Jesus was speaking, a Pharisee asked him to dine with him. Wow. So he went in and reclined at table. The Pharisee was astonished to see that he didn't wash first before dinner. And the Lord said to him, now you Pharisees cleanse the outside of the cup and of the dish, but inside you're full of greed and wickedness. You fools. Didn't he who made the outside make the inside also? But give alms those things that are within, and behold, everything is clean for you. Hang on, there's a verse in Titus, I think, that I want to bring up when we get here. But woe to you Pharisees, for you tithe mint and rue and every herb, and neglect justice, and the love of God. These you ought to have done without neglecting the others. Woe to you, Pharisees, for you love the best seat in the synagogues and greetings in the marketplaces. Woe to you, for you're like unmarked graves, and people walk over them without knowing it. That's tough. That's big tough. One of the lawyers answered him, Teacher, in saying these things you insult us also. And he said, Woe to you lawyers also, for you load people with burdens hard to bear, and you yourselves do not touch the burdens with one of your fingers. Woe to you, for you build the tombs of the prophets, whom your fathers killed. So you are witnesses, and you consent with the deeds of your fathers, for they killed them, and you build their tombs. Therefore the wisdom of God said, I will send them prophets and apostles, some of whom they will kill and persecute, so that the blood of all the prophets shed from the foundation of the world may be charged against this generation, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who perished between the altar and the sanctuary. Yes, I tell you, it will be required of this generation. Woe to you, lawyers, for you have taken away the key of knowledge. You did not enter yourselves, and you hindered those who were entering. As he went away from there, the scribes and the Pharisees began to press him hard and provoke him to speak about many things, lying in wait for him to catch him in something he might say. Before we even get into anything, that last line is today, right? Like you see that all across social media. Sometimes you see it in regular conversation, just Christians being provoked to speak about many things. About many things. Not about the one thing. Not about that one thing, salvation and how to deal with the wrath of God towards you. No, they want to speak about many other things. Just trying to catch us in something that we're going to say. But jumping back up to the top of this, let's take it apart. It says, when the crowds were increasing, that was when Jesus began to preach the message of this generation is an evil generation, right? It's when the crowds were increasing. He didn't want anyone in the fickle crowd to miss this. He didn't want anyone to not catch this. You guys are evil. You guys are evil. Again, just very different than how we might start a message if we were, first off, I don't know if many of us would be preaching in the manner that Jesus would be. That might be the first thing to really check in our hearts. But assuming we were, is that, that's not really how we would start a message. Excuse me, right? Like our wisdom as it is, we catch more flies with honey instead of vinegar. Well, Jesus is starting off with a lot more vinegar than honey right here. You get a whole bunch of crowds, you get a whole opportunity. And how does Jesus start? You are all evil. You are all evil. And the reason for that evil is what he says next, right? It seeks for a sign, right? But no sign will be given. Right? Of all the things that Jesus could have said to prove his point, right? And especially back in the Roman world, in the Roman-controlled world, there were a lot of injustices he could have pointed to. And he does sometimes, but there's a lot of things he could have pointed to right here to prove his point that the generation's evil, but instead, he links it back to the fact that they seek for a sign. And, it's fair to interpret sign here as miracle, because that's really what we're talking about here. He knows that the generation is evil because they seek a miracle. And Jesus' response is no sign, no miracle will be given to it except the sign of Jonah. The miracle of Jonah. That's the one they're going to get. Right? Now, why does Jesus say they're evil for seeking a miracle, right? Because I've been through this passage with a couple of people, and sometimes it rubs people the wrong way that, here you are, Kari, saying that Jesus doesn't want you to believe with blind faith. And so, okay, I don't want my faith to be blind. I want to base it on something. How about a miracle, right? Let me ask for a miracle, right? But keep in mind who he's talking to. It does apply to our generation, but originally he's talking about this specific crowd, right? You guys are an evil generation. You're seeking a miracle. Right? Keep in mind what just happened before. Right? An exorcism just happened. An exorcism just happened in the verse preceding this. And they watched it. They watched him cast the demon out. And yet, having just witnessed that, well, can I see another miracle, please? But I just did one. Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. That one's not really. Can you show me another one? Right? And it just continues. Show me another. Show me another. Show me another. For those of you that are biblically literate, it's like the story of Gideon. You know, he keeps asking for miracles from God so that way he knows whether or not God wants him to do a certain thing. And, you know, at a certain point, it's like you're just hoping that if you keep asking, God's going to change his mind. And, yeah, not the case. But Jesus here says that what they'll get is the miracle of Jonah. Right? As Jonah became a sign to the people of Nineveh, so will the Son of Man be to this generation. As Jonah became a miracle to the people of Nineveh, so will the Son of Man be to this generation. Well, how did Jonah become a miracle to the people of Nineveh? Right? And this is one of those areas where you can't you can't water down the fact that like the fidelity of the words. You can't water that down because, you know, I've heard people try and explain away the story of Jonah. You know, maybe instead of a whale, it was a big fish, not realizing that the word in Hebrew for sea creature there covers whales and fish because they didn't have the same animal classifications back then that we do today. And also missing the fact that in that region of the world, there have been very, very few, but a couple reports of people actually having been swallowed whole by really big fish. They weren't held in their bellies for 3 days, maybe a couple of hours, but it's not unheard of. All that aside, right? All that aside, Jesus treats this story as true, right? Jesus treats this story as so true that he's saying that so will the Son of Man be. As Jonah did X, the Son of Man will do Y to this generation. Right? And so, you know, what happened to Jonah? You know, he got swallowed by some sort of a sea creature and is within its guts, within its belly for 3 days. 3 days and 3 nights. Right? Go back and read it. Now, he was in that situation because he was trying to run away from what God wanted him to do. So God sent a fish to scoop him up and literally swim him directly into his calling. Thank the Lord that Jesus is at least a smidge more obedient than Jonah. But he still likens what's going to happen to him to what happened to Jonah, right? And sure, Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a whale, or fish, whatever, right? What I will say is that if you are in the belly of some sea creature for 3 days and 3 nights, as a medical person, especially considering the era in which Jonah lived, I'm willing to call that certain death. 3 days, 3 nights, no food, no water, and worse, you're probably exposed to a ridiculous amount of salt water in there, right? That should be certain death, right? You could read Jonah as if he died, or you could read Jonah as if he was miraculously preserved. But either way, the situation that Jonah is in a regular, under regular rules, would be certain death for whoever's there, right? What's Jesus about to go through? Crucifixion. Under normal circumstances, that ought to be certain death. But in both cases, they will beat certain death. All right? That right there is, in short, the sign of Jonah, right? A man facing certain death, being swallowed up in it, and coming out the other side alive. Not to mention the parallels of, 3 days, 3 days under the surface, right? In Jesus' case, under the surface of the earth. In Jonah's case, under the surface of the water, right? These parallels are there. And what's Jesus saying? The Queen of the South, right? She's a historical figure from the Old Testament. Go back and read Solomon's time. Read about her. The Queen of the South will rise up at the judgment. Why? Because back in her day in the Old Testament, she came from the ends of the earth, right? She came from countries and lands way far from Israel just to hear the wisdom of Solomon. And Jesus is saying, look, I'm here. I'm greater than Solomon, right? There's people, basically what he's saying to these, to this crowd that has a religious background steeped in the Torah, right? There are people in your Old Testament, in your Torah scriptures, that are going to condemn you on Judgment Day. Argument being, you guys had God in the flesh and you didn't listen to him? Dude, I just had Solomon. Like, if I had that, man, I would have been, the men of Nineveh, especially the men of Nineveh will rise up at the judgment. They repented at the preaching of Jonah. And I'd be hard pressed to call what Jonah did preaching. Right? You go, whether you're reading in Hebrew or in English, Jonah's sermon really wasn't much of a sermon. It was more of a business card, if anything, right? In the Hebrew, Jonah's sermon to Nineveh was 5 words long, and he didn't even want to give it. And yet, the people of Nineveh repented. There's something to be said about there, right? There's something to be said, especially for that, of recognizing truth. Recognizing truth despite evil. And that's what, the people of Nineveh could have been spiteful, and rejected the message of Jonah because of the jerkishness of the messenger, right? Jonah didn't want those people saved, didn't want to see them come to life, in servitude of the Hebrew God. He wanted God to fry him. That's what he wanted. And he tried to make that happen by being as minimal as possible in preaching grace. There's all sorts of bait there for the Ninevites to just laugh him off, to just shrug him to the side. But despite all that, they still recognize truth. I'm not saying that messengers of the gospel have a license to just be as rude as they want to be. But what I am saying is that if you recognize that the Lord is speaking to you, even if the vessel it's coming through isn't your favorite person, put that to the side and deal with truth that's coming to bear on your soul, man. That's what the people of Nineveh did. That's what the people of Nineveh did. And more to the point, you have access to the sign of Jonah, to the sign of the Son of Man in the scriptures, right? In the scriptures, in the record of Jesus' people telling this story for the last 2,000 years. You've got access to all the details, all the relevant details, and then some, of what happened when the Son of Man got swallowed up in death, placed beneath the surface, and beat certain death 3 days later. You've got access to that. They didn't. Use it. Use it. Now moving on to this next segment here, Jesus continues, no one after lighting a lamp puts it, this is really, by the way, this is going to be really convicting for certain Christians, right? No one after lighting a lamp puts it in a cellar or under a basket, but on a stand. Why? So that those who enter may see the light. So that those who enter may see the light, right? Let's skip this section right here for now. Skip this section right here, right? If then your whole body is full of light, it will be wholly bright, as when a lamp with its rays gives you light. So at the end of this little section here, right, Jesus compares your body, he compares your body to a lamp that gives light, right? If your body is a lamp and you've been saved by Christ, right? Jesus has lit his light within you, right? That's not that crazy a concept to those of you that have repented, placed your faith in Christ. Like, that's not a crazy concept, right? We got hymns about that, right? This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, right? Where do you think where do you think that comes from? No one after lighting a lamp, right? Who lit your lamp? God, right? God lit your lamp. As Paul says in Corinthians, right? I forget if it's first or second, but he says in Corinthians, what happened in salvation, this is what happened at creation, right? God spoke to a chaotic darkness and said, let there be light, and there was. Right? The light of the world moved in. These lamps are no longer dark. They now shine the light of Christ. Right? Our job is to let that light shine. Right? But what's Jesus saying here in a parabolic way? No one after lighting a lamp puts it in a cellar or under a basket. Right? Jesus is saying, I lit your lamp. The Father lit your lamp. The Spirit lit your lamp. Do you think we intended after lighting your lamp to just hide you under a basket? Or put you in the cellar where no one can see you? Is that what you think we intended? Now, keep in mind, if the lamp is in the cellar or under a basket, it's safe, right? It's protected. Right? If there are people within the home that don't want it lit, and the lamp is in the cellar or under a basket, that lamp is perfectly safe. Right? The forces that want darkness to reign don't care about covered lamps. They don't. They're not a threat. Right? But Jesus is saying that God's purpose in lighting the light of salvation in you was not to hide you, but to put you on a stand, right? And I want to notice here that it's not necessarily us putting ourselves on the stand, right? That's not where we're at. We're just after the glory of Jesus Christ. We're after obedience. We're after sanctification. We're after life in Christ. God plans in salvation, now that he's lit you, he will place you on a stand so that those who enter may what? See the light. So that those who come around you, is there any limit on those who come around you? No. When you invite people over, when you invite people over to your house, right? Do you leave the lights on except for that one friend? Like when that one friend comes over to your house, do you turn all the lights out? No, that's weird. The whole point of having the light is so that anyone and everyone that enters into the house may see the light and also see by the light. Right? Because that's what light does. It exposes, it illuminates, right? It shows us things that we might not have wanted to see. Right? That's how Christians are. If no one told you that, well, I guess I'm here to tell you. Right? Part of God's purpose in saving you was to place you on a stand, metaphorically, so that all those in your life, whether close to you or far from you, see the light. How close do you have to be to a lamp to see the light that it's shining? That's a trick question, right? You just have to be within eyeshot. You just have to have a clear line of sight of the lamp, and nothing has to be in its way, because light travels far. Light travels far. Right? It's not until you start dealing with vast distances of space that light actually takes time, a measurable time, to really get anywhere. Right? As far as this earth is concerned, if you could, if the curvature of the earth wasn't something to deal with, if someone were to light a lamp on the opposite side of the earth, and you were just happen to be gazing anywhere in that direction, you'd see it instantly. The second that light came on, you'd see it. Right? That's how your life ought to work with all those around you. The very instant that people place eyes on you. Even for the shortest length of time, it should be pretty obvious that light's coming out of you, right? I say pretty obvious, it should just be self-evident, right? Like you're looking at your computer screen now. You don't say it's pretty obvious that it's lit. No, it's either lit or it's not. There's not gradients to this, right? There's gradients to how strong the light is, but that's under the umbrella of yes, it's lit. Only after you answer yes do you then enter a gradient of, okay, how much light is coming? But it's a yes or no question whether or not the lamp is lit in the first place. Right? So this whole teaching right here from Jesus, amongst many others, completely kills the notion that your relationship with Jesus is a private affair. How can it be when Jesus himself describes it as light coming from a lamp that's placed on a stand? That's not private, right? I mean, take a second right now if you're inside or the next time you're in your house or ever, take a look at where all the light sources are. You ever seen a lamp on the floor of a fully furnished house? No, you haven't. You just haven't. I got a light above me now, light in the kitchen, light in the living room, but they're all in the ceiling, right? Heck, even in our bedroom, the lamps aren't on the floor. That's weird. That's weird, right? If the lamp is on the floor, maybe that's an indication that the person just moved into the house. Oh, and that'll preach. If your lamp's on the floor, maybe it's because you just got saved. Or maybe it's because you don't want to do the work of actually furnishing your life and putting that light where it needs to be. Right? But that's how it's supposed to be. Right? So, again, using this as a rubric, right? Can you really say that there's any such thing as an extra Christian? I don't think you can. I know what people mean by it. I think what they mean is abrasive and really un-Christ-like. But if this is the standard, if this is God's aim, how is it possible to be too heavenly minded to be of any earthly good? The whole reason God saved you is so you could shine a heavenly light into this darkened earth. He wants you to be always heavenly minded. The second you're not heavenly minded is the second your light stops shining. And for all practical purposes, you're useless as a lamp. Useless. Now, Jesus would say your eye is the lamp of your body, and when it's healthy, your whole body's full of light. But when it's bad, your body's full of darkness. You got to be careful what you're watching, man. That's why he says, because of that principle, because of the principle that the eye is the lamp of the body, be careful lest the light in you be darkness. Right? You're shining something, but it might be dark. And whether or not it's light or dark is dependent upon what your gaze is on. Is it on Jesus and the things of heaven? Or is it on literally anything else? Doesn't have to be obviously sinful. But if you're not looking at the light, you're looking at darkness. It's just what it is. And Jesus gives the final phase of this flowchart here. If then your whole body is full of light, having no part dark, right? What does this sound like? What does this sound like, right? Those that are pure of heart. Remember the Beatitudes earlier in Luke 6, Matthew 5, right? Those that are pure of heart are going to be the ones to see God. This is just that same Beatitude worded slightly differently. If your whole body is full of light, having no part dark, having no mixture, it will be wholly bright. As bright as it could possibly be, as when a lamp with its rays gives you light. Right? And people think that darkness really isn't that obvious. It's not that darkness isn't obvious. You're just that blind. Right? Right? If you have a lamp that's made of multiple bulbs, right? Wait for one of those bulbs to go dark. Right? It's just one bulb of 5. It's not that bad, right? Yeah, sure. You're still getting some light, but it's a very noticeable diminishment. Right? But if you don't change that bulb fast enough, you get used to it. And then when you finally do change out that broken bulb for a new one, you're like, oh, dang. Was this always that bright? Yeah, it was. That's how quickly you can get used to darkness, even in a physical sense. How much faster a spiritual one? Oh, sinners. Oh, former sin addicts. How much faster, right? Now, all this is pretty heavy, right? Coming from the sign of Jonah and looking for a miracle in the face of miracles is itself evil. You guys aren't as religious as you think you are. Be careful that you're not mixing light and dark. God's purpose for you is to be a light. Was to be a light to a dark world. And in Israel's case, you can look through the Old Testament, Israel was supposed to be, in some sense, a light to the nations. Right? That's what Israel was supposed to be, a light of godliness to the surrounding nations, right? He's not saying anything that God didn't tell the people of Israel before. He's saying the same stuff. Oh, people of Israel, you're supposed to be a lamp, holy bright, giving your light. Right? In the face of a message like that, I would think, at least I would, start reflecting, go to my prayer closet a bit. I would not do what this guy did, though. While Jesus was saying all of that, the Pharisee asked him to dine with him. Dude, were you even listening? Because based on what's going to happen in this conversation, he wasn't. Right? But, what is this if not acting? This is acting lit up, right? Jesus just gave this whole, piercing message on being properly lit, having no part dark. And so the Pharisee's like, you know what? Let me just invite Jesus into my house to dine with me. That should make me look bright, right? Oh, look at me. I'm hanging out with Jesus. Right? But Jesus sets him up. He's going to give the application of this now, right? The Pharisee was astonished to see he didn't first wash before dinner. And Jesus, knowing that, he's going to use this as an object lesson. You Pharisees cleanse the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you're full of greed and wickedness. Right? They care more. They care more about looking bright than being bright. Right? That right there, big characteristic of false religion, big tripping point, not even just of conservatives, but conservatives, liberals, just everyone. This is a big potential tripping point. It's just a curse of humanity that we care more about looking bright than being bright, because it's a lot easier to look bright than it is to be bright. It just is. It just is, right? The way this Pharisee did it was by inviting Jesus in, makes him look spiritual, right? How do we do it, right? By having outrage at the things we want to have outrage at, right? I think that's a fair crucifixion of both sides, right? Of everyone possible. People try to look bright a lot of the times through outrage and false sincerity, right? That's what we do. That's what we do. You bring up certain things to somebody, they just get all, But do you have that same passion for the sins in your own heart? All right? It's a common talking point from the left towards the right, and it's fair. I'm not going to get in the way of it, but that also goes for them. Like I said, abortion is just kind of big on my mind. It's one of the examples I use quite a bit lately. But to those on the left that are saying, hey, you made this law, but you don't really care about them after they're born. Okay, that might be true for some. Right? But how much do you even care about them once they're born, right? How much have you actually looked into orphanages? How much have you looked into, the struggles of single motherhood? For most of us, left or right, we just haven't. We're just outraged. We're just outraged because it's fun to be outraged and because we're convicted about something. All right, we're cleansing our outside, but inside we're full of greed and wickedness. Fools. Didn't he who make the outside, make the inside also? God. But give as alms, right? Offerings, right? Give as offerings those things that are within, and behold, everything is clean for you. Everything is clean for you. Hang on, I'm going to take a second to kind of look that up in Titus, just because it reminded me of that verse. Titus, all things are clean. Titus 1:15, that's what it is. To the pure, all things are pure, but to the corrupt and unbelieving, nothing is pure. All right, that's tough. All right, that's tough. One, that proves that the letters of the New Testament aren't pulling anything that Jesus didn't already teach, right? But to the pure, all things are pure. But to the defiled and unbelieving, nothing is pure, but both their minds and their consciences are defiled. Right? It's Titus 1:15. Right? What's Jesus saying? What's Jesus and what's that verse in Titus saying, right? If you've given everything of your insides to God, if you've given over your inside to God for salvation, and he's actually lit that light within you, right? It's not that sinful things now become unsinful, right? It's not that, oh, now that I'm a Christian, I can sleep around because now that I've been made pure, that now is pure. No. What it means is that to someone whose life is ruled by the light, they will not handle anything that God made in an unclean way. And as a consequence of that, everything is now clean for you, right? Alcohol as an example, right? To someone whose entire life, right, life, motives, desires, everything of the heart is ruled by the light of Christ, they're not going to use alcohol in a crazy way, right? They're not going to be using drugs in an unclean way. Right? Just two just two examples, right? They're not going to be using their money in an unclean way, right? Money's not inherently sinful. People can be, and the way that we use money a lot of times can be very sinful, right? But you can use the same dollar to help a single mom raise that kid, or you can use that same dollar to fund Planned Parenthood to kill that kid, right? You can use a dollar to bring a woman out of poverty into honor, or you can use that same dollar to tip that woman on the stripper pole, right? It all depends on your heart. Depending on your heart, everything's either clean or unclean for you. For the Pharisees, it's unclean. All right, and Jesus is going to say, why? Woe to you, Pharisees. Right? You tithe mint and rue and every herb. They would even tithe down to their freaking spice cabinets, dude. You tithe, like ridiculously, like you tithe very specifically. You tithe very diligently. However, you neglect justice and the love of God, right? Just a quick aside here. I won't go into it too much because the entirety of the Gospel of Luke really touches on it. But if you haven't noticed by now going through Luke, those two things go together. Those two things go together. Justice and the love of God. You don't have the love of God without justice, and you don't have justice without the love of God. Two sides of the same coin. The Psalms even say that the foundation of God's throne is justice. All right, and the Pharisees have neglected that. Doesn't much matter that they tithe, right? And because they've neglected it, even their tithes and offerings are an abomination. And what does Jesus say? These you ought to have done without neglecting the others, right? So again, to people that think that, people think that religion is pointless and you just need to be in flow with the love of God, right? Jesus is not condemning their tithing. He's not condemning any of the religion that they have. Because remember, Jesus as God gave them that religion. Right? He's not He's not demonizing that now. What he's saying is you should have done all of that tithing. You should have done all of those religious rites without neglecting justice and the love of God. Woe to you, Pharisees. You love the best seat in the synagogues and greetings in the marketplaces. They love being celebrities. They love being celebrity pastors. But woe to you. You're like unmarked graves and people walk over them without knowing it. You are places of death and people don't even know it. And people don't even know it. Right? Same things today. There's plenty of people out there that love their pastorships, not for the fact that they're serving God and serving the flock, but because it gives them the best seat somewhere. Right? They don't really care about having the best seat in a synagogue. They just want to have the best seat. And they've found a way to be foxish and kind of weasel their way to the best seat in the realm of synagogue, in the realm of religion, right? If the call of religion ever mandated that they give up their best seat, well, religion doesn't seem so much worth it anymore. What's the point of you, God, if I don't get my best seat? Right? And keep in mind, what's happening here? Jesus is shining light. Jesus is being the light of the world, right? He's literally coming to a person's home. I mean, this is literally what happened. This is literally his scenario, right? Right? No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it in a cellar or under a basket, but on a stand so that those who enter may see the light. What is the Father doing in Jesus throughout the Gospels? Putting him on a stand, in this particular instance, in a Pharisee's home. And the Pharisee asked him to be there, right? You've got the ultimate lamp inside your home, and he's shining at full brightness. And he's exposing everything. Right? He's been talking to the Pharisees this whole time. Christians notate this. He's been talking to the Pharisees this whole time. Hasn't addressed the lawyers once. And yet, now, for some reason, one of the lawyers feels the need to defend himself. Saying, "Teacher, in saying these things, you insult us also." Right? Don't be shocked when that happens as you shine your light as a Christian, right? As you call out sin in one group, right? Some other group that you're not talking to at all that partakes in the same sin is going to feel threatened, right? They'll see what's happening over there and they'll try to head you off of the path because they don't want God's kingdom coming to them next. So they head you off of the path, and saying these things, you insult us too. Right? The unsung implication here is like, are we enemies now? Do you want all of us as an enemy? And Jesus, not scared, takes all the smoke. Woe to you lawyers also. I got some smoke for you too, since you want to get in on this. Let me shine on you now. For you load people with burdens hard to bear, and ye yourselves don't touch the burdens with one of your fingers. Now, this is where, again, I come for both sides, right? For a lot of the time on my channel, I've got a bunch of content explaining, or at least touching on how conservatism, not Christianity, but conservatism, can load people with burdens that are hard to bear, right? You got yourself into this mess, get yourself out of it. Completely neglecting the fact that Jesus calls us to have a kingdom generosity to people that mess their own lives up, right? Oh, be careful giving money to people on the street because they got to learn to be responsible. Completely circumventing the fact that that money's not yours, right? The King of your salvation commands you to be generous with that money. But Jesus, they're gonna despitefully use me. Yeah. You think I didn't know that when I gave the command? And so in that way, we circumvent the commands of God on the conservative side and just load people with burdens that are hard to bear. And we don't really do anything to touch them. We just kind of preach at them. You kind of preach at them the merits of personal responsibility and whatnot. It's not that I don't necessarily believe some of that stuff, but not the way that conservatism teaches it, not in its core, right? On the left side of the equation, it happens, the same thing happens. They load people with burdens that are hard to bear and don't do anything to touch them to touch the burdens with one of their fingers, right? Take transgender ideology, you know what I'm saying? There's no helping a person understand transgender philosophy. It's just you either understand it and you kind of bow to it, or you just don't. You know, had it happen so much, man. Like, well, maybe can you help me understand the fact that it seems like genders are multiplying at a ridiculous rate? You know, there's always a new set of flags out there for a new set of people. Can you help me understand that? No, there's no help to understand that. You're loading people with burdens that are hard to bear, right? In the case of transgender, it's just impossible to bear because we're talking about stuff that doesn't exist. But that's what happens. They don't do anything to touch the burden of understanding trans philosophy. They just point at you and say, understand it innately, or else you're kicked out. You don't have a seat at the table anymore. Woe to both of you. You build the tombs of the prophets, whom your fathers killed. Right? You build monuments to godly people in the past. Martin Luther King Jr. for one, whom your fathers killed. Right? Right? It's not just conservatives that have to deal with this, right? Both sides had a hand in this, whom your fathers killed, right? In the case of the prophets and lawyers, right? You go back and read the books. You go back and read the prophetic books like Jeremiah and such, and you see the people that oppose Jeremiah talk just like the Pharisees in the Gospels. They're cut from the same cloth, and yet the Pharisees of Jesus' day would build tombs and monuments to prophets like Jeremiah. Even though the people in Jeremiah's day that thought like them killed them. Right? And that's why Jesus would say, you're witnesses and you consent to the deeds of your fathers, for they killed them and you build their tombs. Right? On the conservative side, what does that look like? We venerate. Actually, on both sides, if we're being honest, we venerate guys like Martin Luther King Jr., but we don't actually do what he said. We filter his messages. Right? We filter his messages. Conservatives love to take, like, I have a dream speech and say, see, we're supposed to judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. And yet, they'll be silent on other messages that MLK preached about how the sanctity of human life is above any property value. To value your property over a man's life is sinful. Because the men are sacred, not the ground that those sacred men walk on, right? We don't ever quote that one. Don't ever quote that one. On the left side of the equation is the opposite, right? You'll quote that one, but you won't judge people by the content of their character. You'll judge them by the color of their skin, by, just by these outer characteristics, right? If they're gay, they're good. If they're straight, they're evil. If they're women, they're good. If they're men, they're evil, right? And so, on both sides, at every level of society, we venerate godly people of the past while filtering their message to accommodate for the sin that we like today. And in so doing, we consent to the deeds of our ancestors that killed those godly people in the past. Right? And that's what's happening here with the Pharisees. And as a result, as a conclusion, Jesus will say, the wisdom of God said. Right? That right there is a key that you might want to consider Proverbs. But he says, the wisdom of God said, personified as a person, I will send them prophets and apostles, some of whom they will kill and persecute. Right? Well, whoa, hang on. Those of us that know the entirety of the New Testament narrative know, well, it wasn't the wisdom of God that said that. It was Jesus that sent prophets. It was Jesus that sent apostles and God that sent prophets. Well, hold up. Is Jesus saying that he is the wisdom of God? Yes, that is what he's saying. That wisdom of God that was personified in Proverbs. I'm him. Right? The wisdom of God said, I'll send them prophets and apostles, some of whom they'll kill and persecute. Why? So that the blood of all the prophets shed from the foundation of the world may be charged against this generation. From the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who perished between the altar and the sanctuary. That's like a Hebrew idiom for, like from A to Z. blood of all the prophets shed from the foundation of the world, from Abel to Zechariah, from A to Z. Yes, I tell you, it will be required of this generation. Why? Because they agreed with the deeds. That's why. You're going to get the same charge as those people, right? Those people from the past will be charged for their sins, but you people of this generation will be charged for the same sin because it's in your heart too. And it's in our heart as well, right? That's why we need Jesus. Woe to you, lawyers, for you have taken away the key of knowledge. You did not enter yourselves, and you hindered those who were entering, right? That's the lawyer's big sin, right? Notice it's slightly different from the Pharisees, right? The Pharisees' big sin is that they would engage in all this religiosity while neglecting justice and the love of God, right? The sin of the lawyers was that they took away the key of knowledge. They didn't enter themselves, and they hindered those who were entering. Right? Two different charges from two different groups that were closely related back then, right? Let the Spirit apply to you, the one that needs to be applied to you. Right? But both of these things existed within the religious camp. Right? The crowds have their issue. Right? And I don't want people that are non-Christian to think that because religious people sometimes have issues and have pitfalls to watch out for, that they are by proxy righteous. You are not. You are not. All right? Jesus is going to get to the crowds later in this long conversation. Right? Well, he's going to get to that in the next couple of Bible videos that we do. But to those that are more Pharisee and more lawyer, watch out for these pitfalls. And really go to your prayer closet and consider whether or not you've done them yourself. Is there anyone that you have taken the key of knowledge away from? Right? They were just on the cusp of getting it, and yet, thanks to you, now they don't. Now they don't. Or maybe, do you consider religion to be a really good thing, and, it's a big part of your life, but if you're being honest, God's been, kind of poking and prodding you about justice and the love of God, right? Not abandoning your Christian, religious traditions. Not that we really have that many from a biblical perspective, but urging you into justice, true justice, based on the love of God, right? Now, the Pharisees and lawyers don't want to hear any of that. Instead of allowing for the fact that, maybe what I think is light in me is actually darkness, instead they just doubled down. As Jesus went away from there, the scribes and the Pharisees began to press him hard and to provoke him, to speak about many things, lying in wait for him, to catch him in something he might say, which is insane. They are trying to catch truth in a logical contradiction. There's a lot of people like that today. Right? Like that professor we saw, Meredith, in the documentary, in that documentary reaction. It was like, are you saying truth is offensive? I mean, well, kinda, yeah. Like,
It's like you already acknowledged that truth is a person.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like truth is a person. If it were a person, I hate him. Because it's not after that. It's wild stuff. Absolutely wild stuff. We're not done yet, though. I want to really consider this wisdom of God bit, right? I want to, just because we're here and able to do it, right? What is Jesus referencing when he says the wisdom of God said, I'll send them prophets and apostles, right? Some of whom they'll kill and persecute. That's not a phrase that you really find anywhere in the Old Testament as far as I can see verbatim, right? But like I said, when I see wisdom of God personified, I think Proverbs, because Proverbs is, about the wisdom of God in a very practical sense, right? So let's go to Proverbs 8, right? I'm going to read through this. Stop at a couple points, right? But as I read through Proverbs 8 in a probably 9 as well. I just really want you to consider, right? Is this describing wisdom or is this describing Jesus? Right? Now keep in mind, Proverbs personifies wisdom and foolishness for the first 10 or so chapters of the book as two different women, both attractive in their own way, calling out to you as a young man, right? Which of these women is going to entice you into a long-term relationship? The woman of wisdom or the woman of folly? Right? And Proverbs compares and contrasts the way of wisdom and the way of folly throughout the book. And you get this really amazing poem here that spans chapters 8 and 9. But as you read it, you're like, okay, I understand personifying traits. You do that in poetry all the time. But it gets to a point where it goes beyond personification, and you're like, is this an entity? I'm confused, right? Remember, Jesus claimed himself as the wisdom of God there. Starting in 1 and 8. Doesn't wisdom call? Doesn't understanding raise her voice? Oh, and for those of you that might have a bit of a difficulty considering the man Jesus being personified as a woman, just consider the fact that the second person of the Trinity is a male in his human nature. In his nature as God, he doesn't have a gender technically, like both genders. The fact that both genders equally image God suggests that God doesn't lean in one direction or the other. Though he identifies as male, and though when he took on humanity, he took on humanity as a man. So the second person of the Trinity is a man in his human nature. Complicated? Yeah, well, reality tends to be sometimes. Especially when you get up in the upper echelons of things like God. But here we go. Doesn't wisdom call? Doesn't understanding raise her voice? On the heights beside the way, at the crossroads she takes her stand. Beside the gates in front of the town, at the entrance of the portal, she cries out, "To you, O men, I call, and my cry is to the children of man. O simple ones, learn prudence. O fools, learn sense. Hear, for I will speak noble things, and from my lips will come what is right. For my mouth will utter truth. Wickedness is an abomination in my lips. All the words of my mouth are righteous. There is nothing twisted or crooked in them. They are all straight to him who understands, and right to those who find knowledge." Right? That sound familiar, guys? Right? Those who have eyes to see, those who have ears to hear, are going to hear what I have to say. Take my instruction. Take my instruction instead of silver, and knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is better than jewels, and all that you may desire cannot compare with her. Let me swap all that out for Jesus, right? Take my Jesus instead of silver, and Jesus rather than choice gold. For Jesus is better than jewels, and all that you may desire cannot compare with her. I'm just saying. I, wisdom, dwell with prudence, and I find knowledge and discretion. The fear of the Lord is hatred of evil. Let me repeat that. The fear of the Lord is hatred of evil. You can measure how much you actually fear the Lord and how much you hate what's evil, and how much you hate what God says is evil. Pride and arrogance and the way of evil and perverted speech I hate. I hate. It sounds like God talking, not just wisdom. I have counsel and sound wisdom. I have insight, I have strength. By me kings reign, and rulers decree what is just. By me princes rule, and nobles, all who govern justly. I love those who love me, and those who seek me diligently find me. Reminiscent of Hebrews, yeah? Or I guess I should say inspiratory of Hebrews, perhaps. Riches and honor are with me, enduring wealth and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, even fine gold, and my yield than choice silver. I walk in the way of righteousness and the paths of justice, granting an inheritance to those who love me and filling their treasuries. The Lord possessed me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of old. Jesus is the firstborn of all creation, fam. Ages ago I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths I was brought forth. When there were no springs abounding with water. Before the mountains had been shaped. Before the hills I was brought forth. Before he had made the earth with its fields, or the first of the dust of the world. When he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep. When he made firm the skies above. When he established the fountains of the deep. When he assigned to the sea its limit, so that the waters might not transgress his command. When he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him like a master workman, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his inhabited world, and delighting in the children of man. You feel that? It's the love of God jumping off the page, taking joy in what he created. But also, are we still talking about wisdom as a concept? Or as a person, fam? Like this is very personable. It's very personal, going even beyond the bounds of simple poetry. It is poetry, but it ain't simple poetry. I was beside him like a master workman, and I was daily his delight. Right? Sounds like a person more than a concept to me. Right? Speaks of the eternal loving relationship that God had within himself, Father, Son, and the Spirit. Right? And they rejoiced in the inhabited world. They delighted in the children of man. And now, O sons, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways. Hear instruction and be wise, and do not neglect it. Blessed is the one who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting beside my doors. For whoever finds me finds life. Sounds like Jesus to me. Whoever finds me finds life and obtains favor from the Lord. How is that possible? But whoever could find this wisdom could not just find life, but favor from the Lord when we are sinners. It's the mystery of the gospel, right? But he who fails to find me injures himself. All who hate me love death. Right? All who hate wisdom love death, and Jesus is the wisdom of God. Right? All who hate Jesus love death. It's that simple. They might not know it, at the most conscious level, but it's true. And this is where we get into the bit that I think Jesus was referring to here. Wisdom has built her house. She has hewn her 7 pillars. She has slaughtered her beasts. She has mixed her wine. She has also set her table. Again, think of Jesus sending out the apostles, right? She has sent out her young women to call from the highest places in the town. Whoever is simple, let him turn in here. To him who lacks sense, she says, come, eat of my bread and drink of the wine I've mixed. Leave your simple ways and live, and walk in the way of insight. Leave your simple ways and live. Repent. Repent and believe the gospel. Walk in the way of insight. Eat of my bread, drink of my wine. Right? And we see this last verse here in the Pharisees, right? Whoever corrects a scoffer gets himself abuse, and he who reproves a wicked man incurs injury. Right? That's what's about to happen. That right there foreshadows Jesus' ultimate fate on this earth in this life. Whoever corrects a scoffer gets himself abuse, and he who reproves a wicked man incurs injury. Right? This is how the world works. And Jesus isn't even exempt from this, right? He is reproving wicked men. And he is bringing correction on scoffers. And in so doing, he will get himself abused on the cross. But in so doing that, he works our salvation. And he works an opportunity of salvation for you. If you don't know him. Right? That right there is the beauty of the gospel. But as we go through the rest of Luke, we'll see what Jesus has to say about how justice and the love of God are intertwined. Right? About how to not take away the key of the knowledge of Christ from people. And we'll see the Pharisees and scribes and all that fail in trying to catch the objective truth, Jesus, and something that he might say, right? I mean, that's all we got for this particular study. He woke up right at the end, man. I appreciate that. He let me get through, bro. He let me get through, bro. But next time, let's see. Next time we're starting chapter 12. Beware of hypocrisy. Beware of hypocrisy, really. And just talking about all that means as far as what Jesus meant in this conversation, right? Some scary stuff there. Some encouraging stuff there, too. Catch y'all next time. Peace.